Because every time you let a comment upset you, a behavior enrage you, or a situation make you lose control, you're not just reacting, you're signing a contract that hands over your emotional power to someone else. And the worst part is you do it unconsciously. You get angry, you react, you demand justice, but in the noise of retaliation, you forget one thing. They've succeeded. They made you lose your composure, abandon yourself, and trade your peace just to respond to something that wasn't worth it. You think you're winning, but in truth, you're losing perfectly. No one can force you to be angry unless you allow it. No one can make you lose control unless you willingly take your hands off the wheel. What you call "they made me snap" is really just an excuse to cover up the truth. You weren't in control of yourself. You're affected not because others are too strong, but because you are too easily provoked. You react so quickly because you've never trained yourself to control your emotions. In a world full of stimulation where people speak too fast, act too hastily, and demand too much, you're far more vulnerable to being pulled into negativity if you don't have principles rooted in calm. Others can only hit your weak spot if that weakness truly exists. They don't create the anger within you, they merely trigger what you've never learned to manage. Emotion is not a sign of sincerity, it's a measure of self-mastery. The more easily someone gets angry, the more easily they are manipulated. Every time you lose your temper, you are being led by someone else. You step out of your position of power and voluntarily become a puppet in another person's hands. All they need to do is say one thing, act with a little disrespect, and immediately you fall into the same old trap. Lose your calm, react, get hurt, then regret it. You repeat this cycle because you've never stopped to ask, why am I so easily manipulated? Peace is not something you pray to receive, it's something you protect with your principles. If you allow everyone access to your inner world, then no one feels the need to respect your boundaries. To have peace, you must learn to value your emotions. You must declare to the world, I'm not so cheap that anyone can make me angry. I'm not so easily accessible that anyone can just take my energy. Because if you don't draw a clear boundary, the world will toss you around like an emotional football. Someone once asked me, so what if people insult me, curse at me, attack me? Should I not respond? I told them, you are not a helpless victim, you are the one holding the power. And when you react unconsciously, you're no longer yourself. You become a replica of that person. They get angry, you get angry. They are rude, you fire back. They create chaos and you walk right into it. If you don't separate yourself from the madness, you've chosen to be part of it. And that choice, that's the real failure. No one truly wins in an emotional war. The first person to get angry isn't necessarily the weaker one, but they're definitely the first to lose control. The one who reacts first isn't automatically wrong, but they are the first to lose their calm. And if you are truly strong, you won't need to shout. You'll only need a calm look, a quiet nod, a silent walk away, and a wordless message. You are not important enough to take away my peace. That's not arrogance. That's the elegance of self-mastery. True strength is not in how loud you can yell or how much you can hurt someone when offended. Real strength lies in how steady you can keep your inner world when the whole world tries to pull you down. The more composed you remain in chaos, the more untouchable you become, and the untouchable cannot be controlled. So next time someone tries to make you angry, pause for just 1 second, not to forgive them, but to remind yourself you have the power to choose your response. You have the right to protect your peace, and you have the authority to not give your power away, not even for a single frown. When you understand that, you'll recognize one undeniable truth. You've already become stronger simply because you chose not to react. And at that moment, you've reclaimed the control that you used to give away far too easily. You are not a victim of your emotions. Don't live as if they are sudden storms that strike out of nowhere and all you can do is curl up and wait for them to pass. The truth is, emotions don't fall from the sky, nor are they dropped on your head by fate. Emotions are reactions, and reactions are choices. Weak people believe they can't control how they feel. Strong people understand this. Emotions are the result of how you interpret events, not the events themselves. And when you change your perspective, you change the feelings that come with it. In the same situation, two people can react in completely different ways. One person gets cut off on the road and immediately explodes in anger, cursing, slamming the steering wheel like they've been personally insulted. The other quietly brakes, lets the other car pass, and continues their journey. no drama, no emotional turbulence. Not because the second person lacks feelings, but because they know emotions won't help the journey. And they're smart enough not to let one small action become a major disruption in their mind. The difference doesn't lie in the situation, it lies in the inner world. Your emotions are not truth. They're signals. They're kind of data your brain sends based on what you believe, what you expect, and what you've experienced before. Someone ignores you at a gathering, your brain interprets it as I'm being disrespected, and you feel hurt. But if your brain interprets it as they're just preoccupied with their own issues, the feeling changes entirely. So are emotions real? Yes, but they are not absolute, and that means they can be reprogrammed. You're not angry because others behaved badly. You're angry because you once learned that anger is how you should react in such situations. You feel insulted not because the words were too harsh, but because part of you believes those words might be true. A truly confident person won't respond to insults because they have no need to fight back against what they know isn't real. You only get hurt when you still doubt yourself. So emotional control doesn't begin with pretending not to notice. It begins with understanding what you're thinking in that moment. The truth is, emotions will always arise. And you don't need to destroy them. You just need to ask yourself, what will I do with this emotion? Like an alarm going off, you can investigate the source and address it, or you can panic and start smashing everything around you. The choice is yours. You are not a slave to your internal state. You are the one in charge. But if you don't learn to step outside and observe yourself, you'll live your whole life like a switch others can flip at will. When you understand that emotions are reactions, you'll stop justifying your wrongful behaviors. You won't say, I lashed out because he made me crazy, but instead you'll honestly admit, I chose to respond with anger, though I could have chosen silence or simply let it go. When you realize you have the power to choose, you step into a zone of strength most people never reach. Because most people don't want to take responsibility for their emotions. They prefer to blame, and that habit of blaming is what chains them to a lifetime of unconscious reaction. No one forces you to scream when you're insulted. No one makes you cry when criticized. No one can control you unless you hand them the control. Every emotion that flares up is an opportunity to practice mastery. You can feel without being controlled. You can observe without needing to resist. You can sit calmly in the middle of chaos and decide whether it's worth stepping into it at all. And to tell you the truth, the power lies in the choice, not in the reaction. From now on, you must program a new belief. I am not the product of circumstances. I am the product of how I choose to respond. Every day, every situation, every word, every collision is a test. Not to see whether you have emotions, but to see whether you have the wisdom not to be dragged around by them like a child. Successful people are not emotionless. They simply don't live by their emotions. They know when to listen and when to let those emotions pass like waves not worth fighting against. You don't have to become a robot. You just need to become someone who can steer. And when you practice long enough, you'll notice something miraculous. The things that once drove you crazy now only make you smile. The things that once kept you up at night are no longer worth a thought. Because you've risen above reaction, you've shifted from being pulled around to consciously choosing your direction. And that is when you truly grow. Not because you no longer feel, but because you finally know how to master what you feel. You think you're getting angry to demand justice, but in reality, every time you're angry is the time you lose ownership of yourself. You're not resisting, you're being controlled. When someone does something that drives you mad and you react immediately, you're not acting out of reason. You're acting on an invisible command you're not even aware of. Lose your temper so they know you're not easy to mess with. But that doesn't make you stronger. It only proves that the other person has gained the ability to alter your inner state with a few words, a certain attitude, or even deliberate silence. Every time you erupt in anger, it's as if you're putting a leash around your own neck and handing the other end to someone else. They pull slightly, you react. They go silent, you feel lost. They raise their voice, you explode. They act cold, you lose control. You're living like an emotional machine programmed by external circumstances, and the problem isn't that you feel something, it's that you've lost the ability to choose how you feel. You don't reflect, you react. You don't step back, you get pulled in. And in that process, you slowly become someone even you no longer recognize. Anger is the cheapest tool anyone can use to control you. They don't need to be smart or powerful or even right. They just need to know your weak spot and press it at the right time. Then you react, lose your calm, abandon your reason, and the worst part? You think you're fighting back, but you're actually doing exactly what they want. You walk right into a battle they've already set up. You lose energy, reputation, and peace just to respond to something that was never worthy of being brought into your inner world. Let me ask you this. Do you really want to live a life where your emotions are controlled by someone else's hand? Do you want to be so predictable that anyone can figure out the exact words to make you snap, the exact moves to make you lash out? If anyone can push you off balance with just a few sentences, you don't need enemies because you've already betrayed the clarity within yourself. And when you let yourself be controlled too many times, you stop believing in your own ability to stay composed. You start justifying your impulsiveness. You make excuses for your lack of emotional discipline. You say, I've had a short temper since childhood, but you forget that every personality trait can be rewired if you're committed enough to change. Let me be clear, you have the right to be angry, but if your anger destroys relationships, ruins opportunities, hurts innocent people, or exhausts you, then that anger is no longer an emotion, it's a weapon that turns on you, and you can't blame anyone else. Wise people don't forbid themselves from feeling, but they always place emotions under command, like a general who never goes to battle in rage, because he knows he'll make his worst decisions when lacking clarity. You are strong not when you win an argument, but when you know you could explode and choose not to. Because you understand that in a world where everyone reacts, the one who can stay composed is the one with true influence. People don't respect you because you shout louder. They respect you because you have the strength to stay silent in the middle of the storm, because you know reaction is a trap. The more you fall into it, the further you drift from your intentional and mindful self. True freedom doesn't come from saying whatever you feel like or expressing every emotion you experience. True freedom is the ability to choose what's worth reacting to and what deserves to pass through your mind without ever touching it. And that choice can only happen if you're awake enough to step outside your emotions, see them coming, feel them present, but not be swept away like a river in flood. So the next time you feel anger rising, ask yourself one simple question: am I willing to let this person control me? If the answer is no, then stay still. Breathe. No need to react, no need to win. Just keep yourself from falling into a state where you know nothing is worth what you'll lose. Because when you can control your anger, you reclaim the power you used to hand over too easily. The power to own yourself, and no one deserves that power. When someone deliberately insults you, when they throw out sarcasm, when they do everything they can to provoke a response, you think they're challenging you. But in reality, they're testing only one thing: whether they can control your emotions. And if you lose your composure, get angry, and respond harshly, you're not proving strength. You're simply confirming that they've succeeded. Every time you react, you're signaling to them, I'm predictable, I'm easily led, I don't have the calm to choose how I respond, I only know how to reflexively react. Weak people need to shout, strong people don't, because strong people know that noise only scatters real power. In a room full of tension, the quietest one is often the most formidable, not because they're hiding something, but because they don't allow anyone to grasp their internal state. They don't let emotions lead. They don't let others pull them out of their zone of control. And that is real strength, the ability not to react to things that aren't worthy of your energy. You don't need to prove anything to those trying to tear you down. You don't need to respond to affirm your worth, because worth doesn't lie in your comeback, it lies in controlled silence. When you choose not to react, you're not becoming weaker. You're stepping into the role of someone who knows is strong enough not to prove anything. No need to beat anyone. Just beat yourself. And let me be direct with you. Most people aren't strong enough to do that. People don't get angry because they care too much about justice. They get angry because they haven't learned how to manage their inner world. They let others drive their emotions, control their reactions, and trigger their defenses. They think silence means defeat and restraint means being disrespected. But in truth, only those who truly understand the value of their mental energy know this. Not everything deserves a response. Not everyone is worth engaging, and not every situation needs you to step in to win. Strength doesn't lie in the ability to respond immediately. It lies in the capacity to observe before responding. The calm person can see the whole picture. The impulsive one sees only the frustration right in front of them. And when you act from an emotional blind spot, you do things you don't want, say things you shouldn't, and end up hurting yourself. Not because the other person is so clever, but because you shut off your own reasoning before you had the chance to use it. Imagine a troublemaker standing in front of you, doing everything to provoke you. They use mocking words, point out flaws, target your most sensitive spots. Now imagine you look them in the eye, give a slight smile, say nothing, and walk away. You don't lose your temper. You don't respond. You don't let them get inside you. In that moment, you don't just maintain control. You've just disarmed them entirely, because all of their power depended on your reaction. And when you don't give them that, they have nothing left. You can't stop others from behaving badly, but you can always stop them from controlling you by not reacting the way they expect. And that, though simple, is the foundation of emotional freedom. The quieter you are, the harder you are to read. The harder you are to read, the harder you are to control. Real power doesn't come from making others afraid. It comes from being unreadable. Because you hold on to something most people drop far too easily: inner command. People will say you're too indifferent, that your silence means weakness, that your lack of reaction means you're accepting disrespect. But remember, the only person you need to clarify things to is yourself. You don't need to win every small battle. You're playing a long game where energy, focus, and wisdom are your most precious assets. And you shouldn't waste those assets on meaningless words, insignificant people, or battles that, even if won, won't take you anywhere. Calm is a strategic choice. And if you want to go where others can't reach, you must learn not to react to what they use to pull you down. Not because you're afraid, but because you know you're strong enough not to need to respond. You don't react, not because you don't see it, but because you've seen it clearly and deemed it unworthy. And once you reach that state, you don't need to say another word, because your silence is the loudest message of all: I am in control. If a single word from someone can make you angry, if one cold glance can ruin your whole day, if one disrespectful act is enough to break your mood, then you're living in a dangerous reality. Your emotions no longer belong to you. They've been handed over to others, and anyone clever enough to recognize that weakness can easily manipulate you. You don't have to be hurt because someone dislikes you. You only need to not know how to protect your inner world. And the troubling truth is most people live like that day after day, giving emotional control to those who don't deserve it. The person who made you sad might not be sad themselves. The one who hurt you might have forgotten what they said the moment they walked out of the room, but you're still clinging to the resentment, replaying the situation in your mind like you're trying to commit emotional suicide through your own memory. They've moved on, but you're stuck. They've left the conversation, yet you're still having an internal dialogue that won't stop. And you think you're the victim, but in truth, you're maintaining the wound because you refuse to let go of what you were never meant to carry. No one has the right to force you to feel a certain way. No one has the ability to invade your mind unless you open the door. And absolutely no one can own your emotions unless you hand them over yourself. Every time you say, he made me furious or she hurt me, you're giving up your inner authority. You're publicly declaring that the emotions you're feeling are no longer yours. And that's the first step toward becoming a puppet in someone else's emotional game. You can feel, but you must not give away the steering wheel. Emotions are natural, but what you need to train is this: who is allowed to activate them? Like a precious room, not everyone should be allowed in. Not every word deserves your attention. Not every look deserves your interpretation. And not every act of disrespect deserves your reaction. People without emotional discipline react to everything, and because of that, they live in a constant state of being pulled, disturbed, and drained. Meanwhile, those with self-mastery are selective. They choose who to care about, what to care about, and which emotions are worth protecting. Imagine you're holding a clear glass of water in your hand. That's your inner peace. Now someone comes along and dips their dirty hand into it, stirring and muddying the water. You could blame them. But the real question you need to ask yourself is, why did you give them permission to touch that glass? Intrusion only happens when there's permission. And if you allow anyone to stir up your inner world, you can't complain when the water gets polluted. A person with emotional sovereignty always draws clear boundaries. No one can make me lose my composure unless I agree to lose it. No one can make me feel inferior unless I believe I truly am. You need to understand the value of an emotion lies in its ownership. The longer you maintain the right to decide your feelings, the harder it is for others to violate it. The most vulnerable people aren't the weak ones. They're the ones who don't know where their emotions reside. They leave them floating out there, exposed for anyone to poke, anyone to hurt, anyone to judge. And each time they fall apart. But you weren't born to live like that. You have a mind to think, a heart to feel, and a will to choose. And if you don't learn to protect those things, there will always be people ready to use them for their gain, or worse, to hurt you for no reason at all. You must be ruthless about reclaiming emotional control, not by becoming numb, but by becoming discerning. What people say about you does not define you. Their actions don't penetrate your value system unless you leave the door wide open. And the storms outside can't destroy your inner house if you know how to lock every level of your thinking. You can't control the world, but you can always control your response. And that is the beginning of true freedom. Starting today, make one firm declaration. My emotions are personal assets. They are not for sale, not casually loaned out, and no one has access without permission. Once you live by that principle, you'll see the world change. Not because people have become better, but because you're no longer as easily wounded as before. You are stronger, not because you forced yourself to be, but because you've reclaimed control over what was always yours, your emotions. And when your emotions belong to you, no one can use them to manipulate you ever again. Silence doesn't mean you don't know how to speak. Not reacting doesn't mean you're weak. And walking away from an argument doesn't mean you've lost. In a world where everyone is fighting to speak louder, where everyone wants to be right, where social media turns every conversation into a battlefield, the one who can maintain silence is the one truly in control. Because silence at the right moment is not a lack of courage. It is a deep strategy that only those who are awake and strong enough can wield. You don't need to respond to every sarcastic remark. You don't need to explain every misunderstanding. You don't need to argue back against everyone trying to drag you into a conflict they've already prepared, because the truth is, the less you say during tense moments, the more you stay in a position of power. The more silent you are in the face of provocation, the more lost your opponent becomes. And when people can't guess what you're thinking, they lose their most dangerous weapon, the ability to manipulate your emotions. Silence is the language of those who understand the power of energy. You don't waste words on meaningless conversations. You don't use emotions to respond to things unworthy of them. And you certainly don't let anyone feel like they can pull you out of your inner control zone with a few taunts. The more easily someone reacts, the easier they are to manipulate. The more someone talks in anger, the more they reveal their weaknesses. On the other hand, someone who is silent at the right moment not only controls themselves, but changes the entire energy of the room. You're not silent because you're afraid. You're silent because you choose to save your energy for something more worthy. The truth is, most arguments lead to no real resolution. Most people attacking you don't actually care about the truth. They want one thing, your reaction. They don't need your agreement. They just want you to lose your temper. And if you fall into that trap, you are no longer in control of your position in the dialogue. You become a player in their game. But if you remain silent, if you refuse to step into the ring they've set up, you disorient them. They won't know what you're thinking. They'll spin in their own frustration while you maintain your ground. Timely silence doesn't kill your voice. It elevates the value of every word you choose to speak. When you don't say everything, people listen more carefully to what you do say. And that's how you create influence, not through noise, but through restraint. People with true inner strength never feel the need to speak quickly. They know that anything with real weight doesn't need to be shouted to be noticed. And the same goes for you. If you know your worth, you won't feel the need to prove it. Your presence alone will speak for itself. No words needed. People often misunderstand silence. They think it means surrender, avoidance, or acceptance. But the truth isn't that. You stay silent not because you have nothing to say, but because saying something won't change anything. It will only drain you unnecessarily. You're silent because you've already seen the core of the issue, and you won't let reactive instincts pull you away from your wisdom. You don't respond because you understand not everyone deserves your emotional investment, and not every conflict requires your participation to be resolved. Silence is an unspoken declaration. I am clear-headed enough to choose my battles. And when you master that, you step out of the world of those constantly tossed around by impulsive emotions. You don't need to be right in everyone's eyes. You only need to stay true to your principles. And that principle is, don't use your voice to react to things unworthy of being heard. Don't use your intelligence to explain things to those unwilling to understand. Don't use your time to win arguments that cost you your inner peace. Every time you hold your silence, you're protecting the clarity of your mind. Every time you don't react, you prove that you are the only one in control of yourself. And every time you walk away, instead of debating, you're teaching others that you can't be dragged down easily. You can't be shaken easily. You can't be bought by the urge to win. You choose peace, not because you don't know how to get angry, but because you're stronger when you don't let anger lead. And that's the kind of power most people don't have. They speak in anger, then regret it, but not you. You're silent at the right time, speak in the right place, and stay rooted in your values. Because you don't need to win every petty argument. You're playing a much bigger game, where silence isn't a void, but a retreat to prepare the sharpest move. And once you understand that, you'll never trade your calm just to satisfy a moment of emotional reaction. You'll keep it as a strategy, and you'll win with your composure. Some people carry unresolved anger. Some live with unhealed failures. Others harbor guilt, envy, and wounds from stories you know nothing about. Then one day they show up in your life with unexplainable coldness, with words laced with thorns, with reactions that seem to have nothing to do with you. And if you're not clear-headed enough, you'll think you're the cause. You'll absorb their emotions, analyze them, react to them, carry them home, and let them seep into your thoughts. What you must remember is this: other people's emotions are not your responsibility, and you are not allowed to become anyone's emotional trash bin. Someone being hurt does not give them the right to hurt you. Their exhaustion doesn't mean you have to endure the toxic energy they release. Their lack of self-control doesn't mean you should become the place where they unload all their outbursts, tension, and instability. But sadly, most people don't know how to distinguish between compassion and naivety. You can understand someone without having to suffer in their place. You can be empathetic without having to carry their burden. You can be present without becoming a dumping ground for their negativity. Negative emotion is a kind of energy. And if you don't have a filter, it will seep into you faster than you think. A harsh judgment, a snappy attitude, a cold stare. If you're not alert enough, you'll absorb these fragments and begin to doubt yourself. Then you'll start interpreting, maybe I'm not good enough, or did I do something wrong? But the truth is, most of what people throw at you is a reflection of their inner world, not your value. You don't have to hold on to everything someone says in anger. You don't need to store every uncontrolled expression from others. And you are under no obligation to carry someone else's emotions just because they don't know how to process them. If someone hands you a bag of garbage, you can choose not to take it. But if you carry it, bring it home and complain about how heavy it is, then the fault no longer lies with them. That's your choice. And you can choose differently by putting the bag down, smiling, and moving on. So don't get wrong. This doesn't make you cold or heartless. It makes you principled, because you know that if you keep absorbing everyone's negativity, there won't be enough room left for yourself, no room for peace, no room for clear thoughts, for positive inspiration, for the things you truly want to cultivate. And then you live in overwhelm, exhausted, stuck, simply because you never drew the boundary. People without emotional boundaries will always be used by others as a place to unload. They're seen as good listeners, resilient, willing to sacrifice. But behind those labels is subtle exploitation, where you keep accepting things that don't belong to you, until you can't even tell which emotions are real and which ones were borrowed from others. And at that point, you're no longer yourself. You're just a distorted version shaped by hundreds of emotional dumpings you silently endured. You need to learn to step back, observe, discern, and choose wisely. When someone lashes out at you, ask yourself, is this anger really about me, or am I just a convenient place for them to unload it? When someone criticizes you or hurts you with harsh words, ask yourself, is this their true voice or the echo of wounds they're carrying from somewhere else? Only when you ask these questions can you stop other people's emotions from becoming part of your own internal operating system. Peace is an active choice. No one can give it to you unless you protect it. And the first thing you need to do is lock your emotional door. Not your heart, but a refined filter where only healthy things are allowed in. You can still love, you can still empathize, but you no longer let other people's emotions rewrite the story inside you. You hold your identity firm, your beliefs strong, and your mental space sacred, no matter who's having a meltdown outside. From now on, every time you sense someone throwing toxic emotion your way, remind yourself of one sentence: I am not anyone's emotional trash can. That sentence doesn't just protect you from harmful energy, it reminds you that you have the right to choose what you keep. You don't have to carry what doesn't belong to you. You weren't born to suffer on behalf of others. You were born to live with clarity, with boundaries, and with full sovereignty over your inner world. And when you truly live that way, you not only free yourself from others' emotional influence, you become the place of peace they silently long to find. You can react to everything, but you shouldn't. Because every time you react, you're investing a part of your life energy into it. And what's important to understand is your energy is limited. Time, attention, emotions all have limits. So if you don't filter carefully, you'll constantly find yourself consumed by things that aren't worth it. Wise people don't let themselves be drained by every look, every word, every expression from others. They understand that reacting is a form of giving power, and not everyone deserves to receive it. Not every sarcastic remark needs a response. Not every disrespectful act needs your intervention. Not every confrontation is worth stepping into. Some people say something just to see you react. And if you fall into that trap, you're no longer in control. You're being led. You think you're fighting back, but in reality, you're being pulled down to the same frequency as someone who isn't worthy of your presence. You're trading your most valuable weapon for a meaningless victory. Reaction isn't always a sign of strength. Often it's a sign of being predictable, and predictable people are easy to control. If someone knows exactly when you'll get angry, when you'll be hurt, when you'll lose your cool, then they hold an invisible remote to your emotions, pressing buttons whenever they please. And when that happens, you're no longer the one in charge. You're being manipulated. The truth is, most people who provoke you aren't seeking conversation. They don't want logic, and they don't care to be convinced. They just want you to descend to their state, angry, negative, chaotic, because when you lose control, they feel empowered. That's how they measure their influence, by how much chaos they can cause inside you. So every time you stay silent, stay calm, and refuse to react, you're refusing to play the game they've set up. And in doing so, you've already won the first move. You must distinguish between self-respect and ego. Self-respect allows you to preserve your worth without reacting. Ego does the opposite. It urges you to respond to every attack to protect a fragile image. But the truth is, your image doesn't live in someone else's eyes. It lives in the way you consistently act in alignment with yourself. And the stronger a person is on the inside, the less they feel the need to prove themselves on the outside. They don't need to speak to claim their position. They remain silent, and everyone knows exactly where they stand. Not everyone deserves your response, simply because not everyone cares about the truth. Many only want to manipulate your emotions. Many just want to vent. Many only aim to drag you down with them. And the more you engage, the more you give them what they want. Meanwhile, what you need is peace, clarity, and focus. Don't trade those three things just to win a fleeting argument. The higher you rise, the less you need to look down. The farther you see, the less you need to explain. Every time you let yourself get pulled into a petty argument, you're shrinking your own world. You're stepping out of your priorities and into someone else's noise. And the frightening part is the habit of reacting erodes your filtering standards. You'll start thinking it's normal to respond to everything until you're exhausted and don't even know why. The one who controls your reaction controls your life. Because everything in life starts with a choice: what to remain silent about, what to act on, what to invest your emotions in. And you can't invest in everything. You must choose. And that filtering, that discernment is what defines the depth of your life, not the number of reactions you produce. Let reaction become a privilege reserved only for the people, the situations, and the values that truly matter to you. Not everyone deserves your time, your explanation, or your presence. Some people only need a glance. Others don't need anything at all. They don't deserve to be analyzed, don't deserve space in your mind, and certainly don't deserve the time you could be using to grow yourself. You have the right to walk away, the right not to respond, the right to leave, and no one can blame you for choosing to protect the purity of your mind from what's unworthy. That's not avoidance, that's a life strategy for those aiming for a level that noise cannot reach. You can have discipline, you can practice calmness daily, you can master emotional control to perfection, but if you live in a toxic environment, sooner or later you'll be drained. Because no matter how strong the spirit is, it's still an ecosystem that needs nurturing. No one can maintain peace in a room full of yelling. No one can stay clear-headed when surrounded by negativity. And no one can stay focused in an environment that constantly pulls them off track with meaningless distractions. You don't just need inner strength, you need an external space to grow it. You are the product of the environment you stay in the longest. Look closely at the kind of energy you're living in. Do the conversations you engage in lift your spirit or weigh you down? Do the people you interact with daily help expand your mind or make you shrink inward? The content you read, the videos you watch, the things you hear repeatedly every day, all of it contributes to shaping the mental framework inside you. You might think you're strong, that you're in control, but the environment erodes you quietly. It doesn't destroy you all at once. It slowly pushes you off course until one day you wake up and no longer recognize yourself. You need to choose your companions, not because you're arrogant, but because you have a responsibility to protect the peace in your own mind. You can't keep listening to people who only complain and still expect your life to feel uplifted. You can't keep giving energy to those who never recharge themselves. You can't stay around people who always see life through a lens of negativity and still hope to keep your faith in the positive. No one stands in the rain too long without getting wet, and no one stays in negative energy too long and remains mentally clear. If you want to preserve your spirit, you need to create an environment for it to thrive. That doesn't mean isolating yourself or running away from the world. It simply means having standards. You clearly know what nourishes you and what drains you. You know when to walk away. You know when to mute the noise. You know what has value and what is just distraction. And you have the courage to take action to protect your mental space, even if that means saying no, walking away from a relationship, deleting a habit, or starting over with a bit of loneliness at first. You don't need a crowd. You just need a space clean enough for you to grow, a place where you don't need to wear a mask, a place where you don't have to constantly be on guard. You don't have to explain yourself, don't have to strain just to be understood. Everyone needs an environment where they can recharge through genuine listening, through deep conversations, through meaningful silences. And if you don't yet have that environment, stop avoiding the truth. Create it. Through the people you choose, the content you consume, the space you build around you, everything needs to be filtered, not because you're weak, but because you understand that mental strength doesn't come from enduring everything, but from consciously choosing what you allow in. The space you live in is the fuel for your nervous system. An environment full of shouting creates stress. An environment full of comparison creates insecurity. An environment full of judgment kills creativity, but an environment full of encouragement, love, and growth makes it impossible not to rise. That's not luck. That's choice. And you can choose again anytime you're brave enough to let go of what's holding you captive, whether it's a person, a habit, or a space that only seems familiar. A strong spirit isn't one that endures everything. It's one that knows what to avoid. It knows what is draining it. It knows when to retreat and recharge. And it dares to take action to protect its inner purity, even if others misunderstand that as selfishness. In truth, it's not selfish, it's maturity. Because you can't give peace when you're living in chaos. You can't inspire others when you're surrounded by what depletes you. So if you truly want to keep your spirit strong, don't just focus on self-discipline or emotional control. Look around and ask yourself, is the environment I'm living in nourishing me or depleting me? And if the answer saddens you, then it's time to change. You don't have to do anything drastic. Just start with one small step. Walk away from a toxic conversation, unfollow an account that constantly spreads fear, spend more time with people who make you feel like you're growing, turn off the noise so you can hear yourself again. Because in the end, real strength doesn't lie in what you can endure. It lies in what you dare to reject in order to protect the deep peace within. True strength doesn't lie in your ability to control others, in your mastery over circumstances, or in your skill to persuade a crowd or make others listen. True strength, the kind that makes you truly invincible, lies in your ability to control yourself. You won't always be able to control the outside world, but if you can control what's inside, you'll always be the one in charge. That kind of strength isn't something anyone naturally has, but it's something anyone can train to develop. You control yourself when you don't immediately react to every external stimulus. When someone insults you, you don't feel the need to strike back. When someone challenges you, you don't feel the need to prove anything. When things get chaotic, you don't panic and join the chaos. You pause, you observe, you choose how to respond, and you act with clarity, not impulse. In that moment, you are no longer a product of your environment, you become the creator of it. And that is the highest level of mastery. You're strong not because you don't have emotions, but because you don't let emotions dictate your actions. You may feel anger, but you don't let it decide how you behave. You may feel hurt, but you don't use that pain to lash out at others. You may feel disappointment, but you don't let loss break you. Every time you rise above an impulse and choose not to act on it, you're forging another layer of mental armor. And that armor doesn't glitter or show off, but it's so resilient that nothing external can pierce it. What defeats you in life isn't the people who oppose you, it's the moments you betray yourself. Every time you know what's right but still do what's wrong because you can't manage your emotions, you drift away from your inner power. Every time you let a word make you lose your composure, a rejection throw you off course, a failure steal your faith, you're showing that you still don't fully control yourself. And the deepest wounds don't come from others. They come from the moments when you lose yourself. You will never master life if you can't master yourself. Because every bad decision, every toxic relationship, every time you fall off track, it all starts from one common point: a lack of self-control. You know that person isn't worth your time, but you stay. You know that job doesn't suit you, but you hold on. You know that habit is draining you, but you keep repeating it, not because you don't know better, but because you didn't master your emotions at the moment of choice. And it's those moments that determine who you'll become in 1 year, 5 years, or 10. Self-control isn't about forcing yourself to be rigid. It's the ability to make wise decisions, even when your instincts want the opposite. It's a quiet power that keeps you from being swept away by a passing wave, only to wake up in the wreckage you caused. The more a person lives by principle, the easier it is for them to control themselves. They don't have to overthink every situation because they've already set clear boundaries. And those with clear boundaries rarely regret their actions because they don't let short-term emotions destroy long-term values. We must choose, be someone who's agreeable to everyone but easily controlled, or someone who's unshakable to most but always anchored in themselves. You can't be both. The one who's liked by everyone isn't always living true to themselves. But the one who stays true to their principles in every situation will always be respected, even if they rarely speak. Strength of character gives off an energy that makes others pause before stepping too close. That's the sign of someone in control. They don't have to impose, yet they still carry influence. Remember, the world out there will always try to get a reaction from you, make you angry, make you doubt, make you act on impulse. But if you remain centered, not only will you avoid the traps set by others, you'll also avoid the traps you set for yourself. Every time you face provocation, insult, or injustice, pause and ask, will this reaction make me a better version of myself? If the answer is no, walk away in silence. Not because you're weak, but because you've already won. You are strongest not when you silence others, but when you don't let anything out there disturb your inner state. Because when you control yourself, you control your path, your way of life, and your future. No one can defeat a person who is not ruled by fleeting emotions. And if you master that, you won't need to prove anything. All you need to do is show up, and others will feel your unshakable presence, even if you never say a word.